Welcome everybody to the first session of the Future Skills Maritime FSM 2020. This event is an attempt at a global platform to ignite thought-provoking discussions that enables path-breaking ideas, especially concerning the technological demands that confront the human resources for the maritime industry of tomorrow. Our first session is titled Rethinking Maritime Education, and I'm honored to invite Dr. Malini Shankar, former IAS Vice Chancellor, Indian Maritime University and Chairperson, National Shipping Board, to give her keynote address. A few words on Dr. Malini Shankar. Dr. Malini Shankar has been a career bureaucrat in India for 35 years. She has been the former Director General of Shipping, Government of India, and she holds a PhD in Public Policy and Institutional Economics from IIT Madras. She also holds a master's degree in Development Management from the Asian Institute of Management, Manila, Philippines, and a master's degree in Chemistry from Mount Holyoke College, Massachusetts, USA. She has had a professional mid-career training at the IIAP, Institut International d'Administration Publique in Paris, France, where she was awarded a diploma in international economics. Dr. Shankar was nominated by the Government of India for training programs at Harvard University and at the University of California, Berkeley. She has been the recipient of several academic recognitions. In January 2020, she was invited as an expert on the water sector to make a presentation to the committee responsible for drafting the new national water policy for India. Presently, she is the Vice Chancellor of the Indian Maritime University and also the Chairperson of the National Shipping Board, which is the top advisory agency to the Government of India on all shipping-related matters. Dr. Malini Shankar is a pillar to the maritime industry and beyond. The Naval Connection is proud to host Dr. Malini Shankar as a keynote speaker at the FSM 2020. Thank you, ma'am. Please take over.
Thank you so much. Sudha. Thank you so much for the introduction. At the outset, I would like to felicitate Shankar and his team for organizing this conference on a very important topic and actually succeeding in getting not hundreds, but thousands to register for this. So Shankar, Mr. Shetty, Mr. Purohit, Captain Chawla, Captain Nigam, who are the panelists of this session, the organizers, the participants, doyens of the industry, and ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to share a few words on my behalf. So this session is focused on the STCW convention. So as all of us know, the 1978 STCW convention was the first to establish basic requirements on training, certification, and watchkeeping for seafarers on an international level. These lay out the minimum standards which the countries are obliged to meet or to exceed. The 1995 amendments, which were adopted by a conference in response to a recognized need to bring the convention up to date, entered into force on 1st February 1997. Part A of the code was deemed to be mandatory, while Part B was the recommendations. The Manila amendments to the STCW Convention and Code adopted on 25th June 2010 aim to ensure that training standards are in alignment with emerging technological and operational demands. The amendments spanned issues covering rest hours of the seafarers, security training, medical standards, alcohol limits, and training and competency for deck as well as engineering personnel. When the 2010 Manila amendments were adopted, the Conference of Parties recommended that, and I quote, a comprehensive review of the STCW Convention and Code should, as far as possible, be carried out every 10 years to address any inconsistencies identified in the interim and to ensure that they are up to date with emerging technologies, unquote. The effectiveness of the STCW regime, specifically its contribution to maritime safety, security, and protection of the marine environment, is dependent on its implementation and its application. This has become challenging in the context of rapidly changing technology and safety requirements. In late November 2018, the then chairman of the International Chamber of Shipping, ICS, Mr. Paulson, called for a comprehensive revision of the Global Convention on STCW. He said, A fully revised STCW regime would allow the industry to adapt much more effectively to technological developments, including increased automation. Considering that most of the member countries are on the white list, even though their compliance level may be suboptimal, there seems to be a need for a more robust global regulatory framework. Parts of STCW, it is felt, need to be updated to reflect the development of modern equipment and take into account the findings specifically of accident investigations. There is, however, a contrarian point of view which states that while the regulations are possibly outdated, they only set out a minimum standard. However, it is felt commonly that change is the need of the hour, but the revisions in the conventions are often outstripped by the rate of change in technology in the realm of IT, in the realm of AI, communications, ship-shore connectivity, and satellite navigation. Maritime training has multiple objectives: safety and security, compliance with external regulations, increasing commercial efficiencies and effectiveness, managing crew competency, and career development for seafarers. A key objective, however, is the prevention of accidents, and reportedly, companies spend as much as 32% of their training budget on safety aspects. The end products from the maritime education and training institutions are expected to know how to use knowledge and to show their professional skills to decide if a ship is seaworthy and is safely manned. How far have we succeeded in this? Have ship detentions been reduced because of improved knowledge and skills among ratings and officers? Does cargo arrive intact and arrive on time? Have accidents been reduced due to enhanced training? When we take a step back and look at it, we know that more than 80% of marine accidents are attributed to human failure. So where does the responsibility lie for such incidents? I would like to share the summary of key findings in a study conducted by MATID, which is the Maritime Training Insights Database report brought out by the World Maritime University in 2018. The results make fascinating reading and show an industry which is not afraid to invest for the right results, but naturally needs value for money. The average respondent organization was reported to have spent $819 per seafarer for training in 2017. The survey covered a huge number of countries in Europe and in the Western world, but did not cover India. While more than half those respondents spent between 1% and 5% of their total operating budget on training, some companies are reported to have spent a lot more, up to 20%. Two, there was a reported trend of increased budgeting for training between 2016 and 17, ranging from 5 to 25% due to increased regulatory requirement and greater focus on safety. Three, 77% felt that the training reflected the operational risk in their business. But there is a problem. This left 13% which said that it did not reflect the operational risk. Fourth, 15% of the respondents stated that STCW is not aligned to industry need, and 70% were seemingly apathetic about STCW, which is a concern. And fifth, respondents identified a number of training priorities which need to be addressed in the next 5 years. Among those, technology-related training, safety culture and skills, environmental and competence training were seen as the highest priority for trainers. A broad range of training methods are employed by shipping companies, and more than a quarter of them said they used a blended approach with face-to-face training, e-learning, videos, and simulation all in the training mix. Of all the methods identified, it is e-learning and simulation which ship owners and operators reportedly planned to increase their use in the future. And this was in 2018. Considering the recent experience of the pandemic, the lockdown, and the shift towards electronic and virtual training, this would only increase further. So, in the Indian context, may I place before this gathering a few points. One, is there adequate research to assess the required training? We find there's no research done to identify the training needs of the seafarers. Support from the maritime industry with regard to the identification of training would go a long way in enhancing its quality. For instance, even today, the NCV competency requirement is not defined, and that could be very important for the country. Two, the reduction in number of seafarers aboard a vessel has considerably reduced the number of trainees on board. Many large shipping companies are not ready to recruit any trainees and are looking for only certified officers. This might lead to a dearth of officers in the future. A proper risk assessment is probably needed to be carried out to address this issue. Third, shortfall in best practices by companies. Many companies have their own assessment of competency with sea time in a rank prior to promotion. But it has been a common issue amongst them that once seafarers gain a certain level of proficiency, they demand promotion to that level. And if they do not receive such instant promotion, they threaten to leave for another company that will offer them the promotion they seek. Fourth, multitude of regulations coming from the IMO as well as the ILO, which imposes immense stress on the crew in terms of compliances. Does the crew get the rest time prescribed in the STCW? Is the STCW regulation in this regard being practical at all? Number five, the effect of mushrooming of MTIs on the standards of education and training. A good number of institutes were established in the private sector to capitalize on the upward cycle of shipping industry. With commercial motives, some of them resorted to suboptimal governance in terms of intake of trainees, quality of training, rating of the institute, and placement of the cadets and industry feedback. Issues of high capital costs, constant expansion, engaging agents, even at times manipulation of placement records were noticed. As recently as February 2020, the Directorate General of Shipping found uncovered a fake certificate scam in India. I have, in my personal experience, found that boys from Lakshadweep who are natural mariners and have attended courses in the mainland had little training and had little evidence to show of their training. Number six is communication skills. Apart from the STCW, the skill required for documentation, drafting letters, writing reports are missing across the maritime industry. Such soft skills may help a lot in future and shall put the Indian seafarer way ahead of the rest of the world. And lastly, are we doing enough to bridge the gap in terms of learning from past incidents? And if I can quote one instance of cases, I mean, are the cases being analyzed professionally and shared sufficiently and shared timely so that redressal measures are taken? An instance that I can quote from my personal experience is the incidence of the ship collision outside of the Ennore port, and there was an oil spill. And at that time, we found that there was what you call the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, were either not in place, and we found later they were in place, but they were not retrievable. And when it was retrievable, it hadn't been read and understood by all the stakeholders concerned. There were problems in finding out where the equipment was, and once I found the equipment, it hadn't been tested. There had been no drills. So, how to use the equipment, and the person in charge of the equipment was not trained to use it. So, these are all some of the gaps that we found. There's a huge gap, but documentation, we are very weak as a country in documentation. Where the DGS has documented, and up till 2017, there has been excellent documentation, but the dissemination of that information for a large scale discussion and debate on that to see how to fill those gaps is something that is not up to desirable levels. So these are some of the issues that I thought to be introspected and debated not only in this session but beyond this session, in the ensuing sessions and beyond this conference, in the interest of a better future for seafaring community. Thank you for the time given, and wish this conference all success and wish the organizers a very fruitful engagement with the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Malini Shankar. That was an amazing keynote address. We request you to kindly stay back to join the panel for a question and answer session at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I now request our moderator for the session, Mr. Deepak Shetty, to initiate the session titled Rethinking Maritime Education. But I would take a moment before that to introduce some of our celebrity and highly accomplished panelists, leading professionals in the maritime world, who have honored us by being speakers and moderators in this session. Let me talk about Mr. Deepak Shetty. Mr. Deepak Shetty, former IRS, former Secretary to the Government of India and Director General of Shipping. Mr. Deepak Shetty is a former senior career civil servant belonging to the Indian Revenue Services, IRS, having served in the Government of India for over 35 years. He has retired as Secretary to the Government of India, highest rank in the civil service in India. He has served as Director General of Shipping, Government of India, Head of National Maritime Flag Administration and National Maritime Service of India for the 2 years, 2015-2016. He stands empaneled since 2016 on the global roster of experts of the United Nations in the areas of maritime transportation and maritime crime. He is a recipient of 24 international, regional, and national awards and commendations in his service career, including the Presidential Award of Appreciation Certificate for a Specially Distinguished Record of Service bestowed on Republic Day, year 2002. Commendation Certificate for Meritorious and Sincere Services Rendered, conferred on the International Customs Day 2002. Commendation issued by the Foreign Minister, Government of India in 2015. Commendation issued by the Foreign and Maritime Affairs, issued by the Director, Maritime Security, Interpol, International Criminal Police Organization in 2014. Mr. Deepak Shetty is extensively well-read and his knowledge across vast domains makes him a much sought-after mentor for students and professionals. The Naval Connection proudly presents Mr. Deepak Shetty as session moderator at the FSM 2020. Before I hand over the moderating of the session to Mr. Deepak Shetty, I'll take a few minutes to introduce our speakers for the session. Again, very distinguished celebrity professionals in the maritime industry. We welcome Captain Pradeep Chawla, Chairman at the Global Met, MD, QSHC, and Training Anglo-Eastern Union Group, Hong Kong. Captain Pradeep Chawla joined at sea with Shipping Corporation of India in 1974 and got his command at the age of 29. He wrote a book on safety at sea called Jahaz Par Suraksha in Hindi in 1992. His book is the only maritime book that was also made as an audiobook in the voice of his beloved departed wife Madhu. He has been with Anglo-Eastern Ship Management since last 34 years and is in charge directly of the QHSE and training for over 650 vessels. He overlooks the training and development of over 28,000 sailing staff and 1,700 shore staff, out of which 18,000 seafarers are from India. He set up the Anglo-Eastern Training Centers in India in 1993 and the Anglo-Eastern Maritime Academy, AEMA, in 2009. Captain Chawla has conceptualized and implemented IT platforms for a learning managing system, a competence management system, and a virtual reality training system. He is serving as the invited member of the Shipping Consultative Committee to the Hong Kong government and as a competent person for IMO. He has in the past served as a Vice President and Council member of the Nautical Institute UK. He is a member of the Intertanko Human Element Group and a member of the Intertanko OCIMF Steering Group on Human Element. He is a member of the Standard Club Safety and Loss Advisory Committee Asia. He is a member of the expert group of BIMCO Key Performance Indicators Program. The Naval Connection proudly presents Captain Pradeep Chawla as speaker at the FSM 2020. We have another celebrity professional from the maritime industry, Mr. Abdulgani Y. Serang. He's a General Secretary cum Treasurer National Union of Seafarers of India, NUSI. Mr. Serang has been associated with the NUSI for the last 37 years, since 1983, and as General Secretary cum Treasurer since 2001, and representing more than 100,000 Indian seafarers working on merchant ships, including offshore and cruise ships of Indian and foreign flags. He also serves as the Executive Board Member, International Transport Workers Federation, ITF. Vice Chair, ITF Seafarers Section, Asia Pacific Region. Vice Chair, ITF Asia Pacific Region. National Secretary, National Coordinating Committee of Indian ITF Affiliates. He has represented India, NUSI and ITF on national and international meetings of the National Maritime Board India, Maritime Employment Board India, International Labour Organization, International Maritime Organization, member of the final drafting committee of ILO Convention for Seafarers Identity Document in Geneva 2003. Mr. Serang is recently involved in incorporating structures for women empowerment under NUSI Women Committee and also for youth under NUSI Youth Committee. Mr. Serang is well known for his humor, which emanates from his brand of poetry called Shairi. The Naval Connection proudly presents Mr. Abdulgani Serang as speaker at the FSM 2020. We have
Thank you.
Mr. Uday Purohit, another professional from the International Maritime Union. Mr. Uday Purohit, President, Institute of Marine Engineers India, MD, Neptunus Power Plant Services Private Limited. Alumni of the Marine Engineering College, DMET Kolkata, of the 1977-81 batch, and later completed his chief engineer class exam. Also, after 50 years, customized and operator-friendly engineering solutions stream leading technology and how it can be used to make machines. Popular at industry association and learn plus marine engineers. He is one an avid reader and he presents Mr. Uday Purohit as a speaker at the FSM 2020. Nigam, founder and president, Maritime Training Guild India, MTG. Captain Prabhat Nigam is an extra master and has had a career at sea of almost 25 years and 14 years ashore. He has been in car carriers as well as passenger liners. He has been a health and safety, auditing and maritime education and training. Presently, University of Maritime Studies, General Manager Training for ASP Management at its and of Premier Training Institute, India. Nigam is a founder and president.
I think Mr. Shetty, you will have to take over.
Yeah, so I was about to intervene. I think there is a major technical glitch there. So while we await, is Sudha back, by the way? She's muted herself. All right. I think without further ado, we may continue with the proceedings. May I seek your indulgence? So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In my capacity as the moderator, I wish to carry on the proceedings further. At the outset, my deep thanks to Sudha for the very gracious introduction. I'm also deeply grateful to the Naval Connection for this very kind invite extended to me, and in particular to Captain Shaukat Mukherjee. It's a matter of delight and privilege to be here amidst all of you this morning and to share some thoughts and also get to hear from an eminent panel of speakers on the topic at hand. I hope my audio link is clear.
Yes, it is clear.
Okay.
But perhaps everybody can.
We lost part of your speech, Mr. Shetty.
Okay.
Right now, you're coming in loud and clear.
All right. So I think
and maybe request the others, those who are not speaking, to mute their mics.
That's right. And also an advice that such of those who, when we come forward to speak, I think if you can get as close to the mic as possible. Fair enough. So I think this is an extremely contemporaneous and perhaps even a very futuristic theme that has been chosen for the session one. So what I intend doing is let's do some crystal ball gazing for the years ahead of us. So I think the major question that begs us is the maritime industry future ready in terms of evolving skill sets for what I would visualize as probably for the next range of 5 to around 15, 20 years. Because very clearly to my mind, that is the time horizon that we need to look at in terms of shaping and influencing the broad skill sets of our seafarers as they emerge. The other question which to my mind that crops up is that are we geared in terms of coping up with the disruptions which are in store and which lie ahead of us? Please keep in mind that when I refer to disruptions, I'm not being sort of a fatalist nor a nihilist. Essentially, what I look at is a very constructive view on the disruptions that are shaping our worldview on maritime matters. And another strand which I want to share with you is, and this is, perhaps you may have heard me saying in the past couple of years, are we equipped for not just the best practice adoption, but what I would take you fast forward to what we call as the next generation practices. And this is where I keep repeating that the late Dr. C.K. Prahlad, who was one of the foremost management gurus of his time, he passed away a good 11 years ago, when he was teaching at the Ross School of Business at Michigan University in the US, he came up and he conceptualized this idea of the next generation practice, which is to look beyond the immediacy and visualize things as we would want them to be. In the given 5 minutes, the way I would want to structure my preliminary address, and before I throw the field open, is to say that can we flag some issues which are of immediate concern to us? And one of the first ones which I want to raise is in regard to the issue of climate change. You know, climate change is here for real. I think we need to be very mindful of the developments on this front. I must commend the IMO for very significant work that it has done. But I think what I'm looking at is something which is beyond the normal run-of-the-mill regulatory framework for climate change. I think the emphasis that needs to be borne in mind while devising some of the curriculum, be it for the pre-sea training, the post-sea training, as well as for the revalidation courses, is to look at this paradigm in its holistic contours, which is to say that are we looking at the proposition of circular economy, the strand of circularity as we understand, because it is so critical in terms of, from a perspective of waste management, addressing issues pertaining to renewal of energy. So what I could just sort of encapsulate and say is that the entire matrix of sustainability management in its entirety is what we need to address. For instance, I seldom come across references to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in any of the curriculum that we ever refer. I'm not advocating for a moment that we need to deep dive into this, but at least a passing reference while we devise the syllabi and the curriculum, it's very, very essential. Are we then propagating the concept of the UN Global Compact, which is a clarion call for the industry to volunteer, come forward, and collaborate or at an institutional level amongst all stakeholders to carry this agenda of climate change mitigation forward? Normally when we refer to climate change management, the concept of resilience, that is to say, the ability to shock absorb, is often is a missing piece, and that's something which bears an emphasis. The other element which is aligned to this is the ESG parameters, which is environmental, social, and governance, because this is now coming forward. And I will just take a moment to take you forward to the proposition of EVA, economic value added. You look at any of the indices globally, whether it's NASDAQ, whether it's NYSE, it's Sensex, and what have you. Typically, the companies which are flourishing, be it the Fortune 500 companies and the ones which are even lower in the grid, are ones which are heeding and respectfully incorporating the parameters pertaining to ESG. And there is a very, very structured and a valid reason for doing so. The consequential ability to raise capital very, very seamlessly, to do so at very competitive rates, and also be seen as being a very responsible, responsive, and a mature company gains economic value added for such of those entities. So we need to sort of understand that these are some of the propositions that we need to pay heed to. There is this emerging proposition of integrated reporting. I mean, all of this might look as very alien, but if we are to address some of the critical issues going forward on how we manage the maritime industry going forward, and which is why we need to have the next generation of seafarers and mariners, is to understand some of these concepts. I'll just spare a thought on what is known as integrated reporting. Integrated reporting for corporates or companies is one where you look at the entire, not just at the financials, not just at shareholder value, but you look at the entire framework of stakeholder value, which is the entire chain of suppliers, vendors, in the entire logic, and all of the players who are aligned to the shipping industry in the value chain of logistics supply. So what IR, that is integrated reporting, seeks to emphasize is that you look beyond the numbers, so to speak, and say that, are we doing enough for everyone in that ecosystem or that microcosm? Because the performance and the functioning of all of those partners will be extremely critical to the way in which the maritime industry will progress. There are standards which are set on integrated reporting by the International Integrated Reporting Council. So these are some of the propositions that we need to bring into play. I'm not even suggesting remotely that we need to look at it extremely comprehensively in the syllabus, but at least a passing reference to this and an understanding that seems that these are some of the very discernible trends which are emerging globally, and that we will be left trailing behind if we do not recognize and incorporate this for our own good. And then, before I pause now and invite the other speakers, the extremely salient piece of the blue economy, the blue economy in all its nuances, the enormity of the resources, the marine life, the biodiversity that we have in our EEZ, in the entire, the waters, the territorial waters, and all of that, which is part of our sovereign jurisdiction in terms of the MZA Act of 1976 as amended. Do we understand the proposition of blue economy? Because a number of territorial jurisdiction, sovereign states, are now beginning to seriously exploit their own blue economy resources to capitalize and leverage them for their next level of growth. Do we spend enough time in understanding this? Do we intend focusing on what the blue economy potential holds for the next level of economic growth and development? And this is so inextricably linked to the fortunes of the maritime industry. So, this is a thought which I would leave for now and say that these are some of the focus areas. I have a few more priority areas to spend some time with you, but I'll do so a little later when I revert at the end of the fourth speaker. So, without wasting any further time, mindful of the fact that we need to keep the schedule going, I will at this point in time invite Captain Pradeep Chawla to share some of his thoughts over the next 15 odd minutes and sort of just to set the ground rules for all speakers. Broadly, since there are four speakers to follow, I have sort of allocated, and this is what I've shared with you in the email, that largely you will have about 15 minutes going forward. So I would urge you to please respect that timeline. And then what we intend doing is I'll then subsequently take over for about 5 minutes, try and sort of summarize some of these proceedings, and also extend some of the thoughts which I wish to share with you. And then I will subsequently throw open the floor for a Q&A session for broadly about 15 to 20 minutes, and then do a wrap up. So without any further ado, may I now invite Captain Pradeep Chawla. Captain Chawla, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Shetty. It's great to see everyone, even though it's kind of in the virtual world and not in Mumbai eating pani puris in the evening, but it's still great to be talking to everyone in this new medium. To start with, probably I would, since you mentioned about the UNESCO goals, so my responsibilities are on goal number 4, 5, and 17, quality education, gender, and diversity and partnership for the goals. And we can have a discussion later on sometime about how we can look at that. So without much of it, and I have one more request that my wife always told me that I speak too much. So when I have 4 minutes to go, just interrupt me if I am not about to finish. So now let me share my screen for the slides and try and get through this in the time frame allocated. Okay, can everyone see my screen? I hope.
Not as yet, Captain Chawla.
Okay, then we have to wait for the lag in the technology lines. If not, we will have.
While you do that, you could please continue to address in the meanwhile.
Yeah, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Share screen. Yeah, possibly share. Yep, because we tested the sales choose.
Yeah, it's now visible.
Okay, great. So let's go through it. So I guess the general perception when we talk about future of maritime training, one would kind of imagine that I would only be talking about online learning, virtual reality, augmented reality, the new buzzwords. But I think the view I'm going to try and share today is a more holistic view. Rather than talk only about it, so I've divided my section 3 into 3 sections: the education framework, the teaching methodologies, and assessing competency. And let's see, oops, yep. So this is kind of the general accepted model in our industry. I think it started from the US Coast Guard putting this up on one of their proceedings 15, 20 years ago. So competency is kind of based on knowledge, skill, and attitude. And more or less, the ship management industry kind of thinks that the knowledge and skill is the easier bit. The attitude is the most difficult bit in when it comes to having competent people and having people performing their tasks to the expectations of the employers. My arrow button does not seem to take it down. Okay. Educators' view, I think generally is kind of that our job is to do a holistic development of the mind. And I think, frankly, the education system hasn't changed from the days of Plato, 385 BC. If one were to look into the Wikipedia, which is the fountain of knowledge for all of us nowadays, no more libraries and no more going through too many books. It's kind of been steadily talking about reading, writing, math, and science. And in the old days, when it was talking about skills, it was physical fitness, music, and art. And if you look at the examination system and the education framework in practically all the countries, it's pretty much the same. 12 years in school and then 2, 3, or a 4-year degree program, depending upon the complexity of which subject you study. There has always been a little bit of a gap in what the employers though want. I mean, in the Industrial Revolution, they wanted assembly line workers, and pretty much today also we expect people to be, we don't, in the industry, people don't care so much about their holistic development of the mind, but they do care about, are they able to do the task that they are assigned without interruption. And every assembly line worker and every master of a ship is supposed to perform 100% of the time with 100% efficiency. So the human factors are come in later when we start to say 80% of accidents are due to human beings. But that's a topic for another conference. So now for the future, my thoughts. I think we are at a stage in the world where we need a complete rethink and a change in mindset about what education is all about. Why do I say that? I think it's knowledge is no longer the something that only by going to a fancy university that one could get. Today you can get the knowledge through various sources which are practically free to access. So the framework about spending 16 years in gaining knowledge in a limited number of subjects, I think are kind of obsolete, and we can gain knowledge on any new subject in a very easy way today. So that's something in the framework of education that we need to think about. And I think all our educators know this graph, that nobody really listens to us and nobody really remembers what we say. At the end of 1 month, it's 21%. And so, yeah, as long as we can get in through the examinations, that's what all MTIs do, right? Get them through the examination and life is good then. Publish the rates, we got 100% of our guys in, out of the college. So today when we look at just a Google search, there are 145 databases in the world which are available through Wikipedia to access, to gain knowledge on any subject. Unfortunately, some of it is being used for the wrong purposes in life, as we know. So I think one thought that I would leave behind is the syllabus should be revised to move away from retention of knowledge to finding, understanding, and application of knowledge. And the knowledge needs to be for the future 30 years, not for the past 30 years. Coming back to our favorite horse to whip, STCW, celestial navigation. Come on. I mean, who the hell even knows what a sextant is on a ship today? Owners stopped putting them on board for something like 20 years ago. And frankly, my sailing from 1974 to 1992, by the time I left sailing in 90s, it was already an obsolete instrument. We all had SATCOMs and GPS and everything. Also, the reality is that the ships are changing dramatically. So from 1970s general cargo ship that examiners used to ask us oral questions on, we went over to the large container vessels and large bulk carriers, but the future now is more like LNG, LNG fueled, ammonia fueled, hydrogen fueled, all kinds of ships which are not yet built but which are coming in the next 5 years. And navigation is going to be completely different. If you have time, I'll share something at the end of the presentation. Artificial intelligence is something that we are all talking about, and this happens. Audio. Are we still, is my screen still visible?
Yes, indeed. Please carry on, Capt. Chawla.
So 50% of all employees will be reskilling. This is from the World Economic Forum, and 52% of the tasks will be taken over by robots by 2025. Well, maybe not 2025, maybe a little while later, but it's going to happen. And just look how the world is reacting to it. Today's morning newspaper, President Xi tells top brass to transform military training. AI seen creating new jobs even as it takes over others. And I think if you pick up any newspaper, any magazine today in the world, these topics about transforming education and training are going on. Competencies that are required in the future, because of the time, I've tried to condense them down to a few, which I think are the most important. The future mariner has to be able to process large amounts of data. Finding a fault in the engine room is no longer about touching and feeling and listening to the vibration of the sound of the bearing going bad. It's about looking at the screen and which alarm went first, which alarm went second, and quickly trying to take the mitigation actions. Data tells us what is going wrong now. Ability to recognize limitations and recognize dangers of automation. We are throwing all kinds of equipment on board ships. Each equipment needs to be studied to see what are the limitations of it, what could be going wrong, and to be able to identify that quickly is an important skill for the future. Ability to work with remote teams. Very soon, navigation is going to be such that the sea lanes starting in Europe will be telling the master what speed to do, what to do, just like the aircraft control happens in airports. So hence, ability to focus on critical issues is important. Alarm systems, there's going to be alarm fatigue. And what do human beings do when they get too many alarms? They either put matchsticks to repose the alarm. I think every seafarer who sailed for a long time will recognize what I mean with the matchstick toothpick theory. And otherwise, they put it on mute and not really listen to the alarms. They put off the critical alarms. So teaching people on that. Ability to manage changes. The pace of change is going to be the fastest ever in the history of mankind in all fields. I mean, who the hell knew what Snapchat and Instagram and Twitter were 25 years ago? And we've changed in the way we communicate. Similarly, a lot of new changes are going to come, and we will need to educate the minds of the young people that change is a constant that they will be living, and it will be going faster than in our generations. I mean, it so happened that I was listening to a song in the car today while coming in the morning, which was talking about all the village life that we all probably have seen, and you know how sentimental we get when we listen to that. But for the young people today, the changes are going to be faster. Ability to learn continuously kind of goes with the same theme. Ability to cope with increased stress. Why are we going to be creating more stress? Because we're going to be having constant change. There's going to be people like to be comfortable in their zones, whatever profession they are in. And then to be able to live in a zone where you are constantly changing does induce stress. Ability to communicate effectively. I think that's going to be in the middle of everything that we do in the future. And this is just an example of something that I wrote many years ago about how things can go wrong on the bridge of a ship. The slides will be available, I guess, later. If you just look at the permutation and combinations and what can go wrong with the various people on the bridge talking to each other, then I think we can understand the importance of communicating. Ability to be a leader, long topic. I think the skills that we will be requiring from the future captain and chief engineer are about organizing, public relations, negotiations, etc. But another topic is to have the data, but drive insights and actions out of that data. The data is available today. We can stream data from every machinery on board. We can see all our ships with 15-second intervals on my screen. We already have that technology on all our ships. So what will we do with all this data that comes ashore? That's going to be the challenge, that who's going to be able to do the analytics of it and convert them into action points and actually follow up on those actions. Team collaboration, I mean, I got a warning, lost connection. Okay, it seems to be coming back. Okay, so teamwork, again, something that we talk about in every industry. Critical thinking. The reason why I put this one up is he's one of my favorite authors, Edward de Bono. I mean, small children can be taught critical thinking with his wonderful invention of six thinking hats. I won't go into that, but those who are interested.
Captain Chawla?
Yep.
Sir, I am sorry to interrupt you. I just had to come on stage. I think you're sharing the PPT, but your PPT is not visible. So if you can just restart. Last 5 minutes, the PPT was not visible. So if you can just share the screen again. If I'm not mistaken, sir, I thought you were sharing. So I just thought I'd let you know.
But I do think that his, whatever he's speaking is so clear that the PPT is clear.
Okay, okay. It's just an option.
Dr. Shankar said. I think you can carry on, Captain Chawla.
Just carry it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for
May I request you to please consider winding up in about 2 to 3 minutes?
Okay. The screen sharing doesn't seem to be going through, so I'll just continue talking. Okay, so teaching methods, next thing, I think they need to keep pace with the times. The young people have a short span of attention. They are used to communicating all on Snapchat and Twitter. So we will need to adapt the way we teach. So, but everything has a place, whether it's classroom, e-learning, VR, augmented reality, hands-on training, peer-to-peer learning, they all have their place. And I think the goal is to ensure that competency is achieved and the methodology used is just a means to the end. And every teacher should kind of go with that. I think I'll skip a few. And also the role of the teacher, I think, has to change from the chalk and talk and deliver and listen mode to becoming a facilitator, maybe a assessor, a role model, maybe a resource developer, an information provider, and a planner, rather than just talk and hopefully hope that the people are listening to you, like I hope people are listening to me today. Real world experiences, I think, are going to be important. Internship programs put into the curriculum of whatever we teach, I think, is going to be important. I think the real challenge that we have is assessing competency. That's the biggest challenge for educators in the future, about how do we assess people. So I think the assessment has to be more about performing, looking at how does a person perform a particular task for which he's being declared competent, whether it's passage planning or whether it is overhauling of an engine. And I think the technology already exists with respect to simulators. In our Karjat college, we have a tanker model, and we can pretty much do everything that is done on a tanker with all the real equipment. Things like that can be used for assessment. And there is a need also to actually get people to be able to do things on the equipment that they're going to manage, rather than just teach them in the theoretical aspects of it. The non-technical markers, behavioral markers, is going to be very important in the future. And I think in terms of simulator training, things like decision making, communication, how does the person exchange the information with his team members, all of those stuff is going to be more important. And I would guide people to the OCIMF new booklet on behavioral competencies. And I think it's also part of the IMO model course 1.30, to which India contributed a lot. Captain Vinayak Mola in particular. Communicating and influencing, leadership and managerial skills, results focus, teamwork, decision making, and situational awareness are the 6 domains that IMO talks about, and which was invented between OCIMF and Intertanko. And the last thing I would like to say is, because there's not much of time left on it, is that, and I wish you could see this screen, because I think it's important thing to get, that when we talk about accident prevention, which Dr. Malini mentioned about it, that are we learning enough, etc., we need to be aware that a human being, in the way he performs, is a combination of individual factors which range all the way from education, what kind of peers he has, family values, his physical state at that time, his past experiences, etc. And at the same time, the organizational factors, which are pay and benefits, opportunities for growth, trust, the Maslow theory, and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, when we analyze accidents, unfortunately, quite often our industry and many other industries, they stop at why did the human being fail? They don't try and understand the ecosystem about why the human being was in circumstances that left him, very vulnerable to fail because of whatever was the ecosystem out there. And I can give you a few examples about that. That if you are designing the traffic flow to a crowded port, are we, putting the traffic in the right places so that they don't interact with each other, or are we bunching them all together at the pilot station and creating situation for collisions and groundings and issues like that? So it's a pretty large topic to discuss, but human performance should be looked at not just from the point of view of the human being failing, but from the ecosystem that failed. And we have to stop blaming the seafarers for every accident and start looking at it. The problem with that is that people don't want to do that because it brings about more political issues to the forefront about, whether the port has the right amount of tax and whether the systems, which are more difficult to handle because of budgets, politics, etc. Okay, so I think that was
Hello.
my slide. So I think I'm done, and maybe 1 minute more if you can grant me. I would like to just mention
Hello.
on some of the topics that Dr. Shetty, Dr. Shankar mentioned. Adequate research funding. Ma'am, you just have to reach out to the industry. We are there to support it. And I'm looking for people who can do research. I don't usually get.
Captain Shankar, I think there's something is
And
going
it's
to
not
miss.
about. And the last one is too many MPIs.
Yes. The entire screen is got blanked
We
out.
should be looking at the quality rather than doing enough to learn from the accidents. Like I said, ecosystem.
It says it's. I mean, my screen shows it's something went.
Mr. Shetty, you're audible and visible.
One moment.
Yes,
please.
and we can also hear him.
No, I'm
as
not.
well as
I mean,
hear
I'm
Captain
audible
Chawla.
in the sense because it says if something went wrong. That's the whole screen is
No,
popping up.
you're audible and you're visible,
In the
Mr.
screen, I can
Shetty.
see that something went wrong.
Maybe until he comes back, thank you, Captain Chawla, for that excellent offer for research funding. We'll definitely reach out to you.
Dr. Malini, I believe Mr. Shetty is not there. Can
Yes,
you?
I think Dr. Shetty is having a slight technical issue and he's refreshing and he'll be back soon. But in the meantime,
Hello.
somebody else in the line can just talk.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
Sorry for the interruption. So thank you, Captain Chawla, for a very insightful overview. Grateful for that. So may we move on now to the next speaker, and I would invite Mr. Uday Purohit to take us through his presentation for the next 15 minutes. It's over to you, Mr. Purohit.
Mr. Shetty, thank you very much, Dr. Malini Shankar, my co-speakers, delegates who are attending this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. First of all, Shankar, you've done a wonderful job of getting such a collection of people to together under one umbrella. Like Mr. Deepak Shetty said, this is a futuristic theme that we are looking at. And whenever I try to predict the future, or I attempt to predict the future, I'm reminded of Nassim Taleb and his book on the Black Swan, and that pulls me back on making predictions for the future. But if I were to start, I'd like to quote Thomas Friedman and his book. Thank you for being late. He says that we have reached the age of acceleration, where changes are happening and continuously happen at an accelerating pace. That means all of us who are now living in this 21st century need to adapt and change at a much faster pace than we ever did before, and that pace is only going to increase. He estimates that this century will witness growth which was each year equivalent to what was 200 years in the past. So you can imagine the impact that this is going to have on all of us. And the maritime industry is not going to be spared. So, like I said earlier, predicting the future is risky business. It is only through serendipity that we have some of our most used inventions today. The computer, the internet, the laser, all happened without people actually looking for them. On the other hand, in 1969, when man landed on the moon, it was predicted by the turn of the century we'd see interstellar transportation, high-speed rockets whizzing around planets. Not many years ago, the Segway was touted as the latest disruption in transportation. Both these things haven't happened. And so maritime education or maritime, what would happen in the maritime industry even 20 years from now, predicting it is a risky business, like I said. So let me stick out my neck and make two statements that I hope I won't look foolish reading them, say, 15 years from now. The first one is that technology would impact seafaring more than ever. Technology will affect all aspects of the maritime industry. And the second one is that autonomous or semi-autonomous vessels will become more prominent. I don't know the schedule. In 2000, they said it would be by 2020. Today, I know some vessels are being built, but whether autonomous or semi-autonomous vessels will rule the seas in the next 15 years is a very difficult question. So I'm going to pick my thoughts here. On two issues. The first issue really is driven by the fact that Dr. Malini Shankar is here, and Madam, this is something that I'm going to keep placing for your consideration. And I call that the escaping from the orbit of mediocrity. The entire, or almost the entire, maritime education industry in India is mired in mediocrity. Mediocrity appears to be the national way that Indians work. I'm sorry, I'm going to get a lot of brickbats for this statement, but I don't believe that STCW stroke IMO stroke the DG Shipping's office, and I'm aware that there are two former DG shipping here, are or should be.
Please continue, Mr. Purohit.
Yeah, setting the syllabus for what is taught in our maritime institutes. I think that job is best left to stakeholders, and stakeholders means ship owners, means shipyards, means original equipment manufacturers, means repair units, and everybody else who is connected with the maritime world. Infrastructure in our schools, at best, or training institutes, at best, is rickety. You walk into any of the training institutes, or most of them, and the practical side of it, where you're supposed to, where the cadets are supposed to learn equipment, is nothing but a collection from the scrapyards of Alang. 30-year-old equipment, which is barely working, is what our students learn on. Look at our faculty. And at the Institute of Marine Engineers, we do employ faculty, have a fair idea what we say, but most of our faculty is outdated. They haven't been on a modern ship for something like decades. And these are the people who are now supposedly imparting education to the youngsters who are going to go out at sea. And let us complete this loop. When our seafarers come back for the certificate of competency, they have to deal with surveyors who question them mindlessly on topics which have no relevance to current maritime trends. There's an arrogance about it, and the student is almost driven to despair. Third engineers are asked questions which even chief engineers are not expected to answer in other countries. I can't think of anything else but arrogance to track this to. And so I keep saying that the Indian seafarer is in demand today despite our education system and not because of our education system. I think that is something that needs to be focused upon, how we could get industry to partake in the training, how can we make our students industry ready. That I believe, whether we go autonomous, semi-autonomous, or we still remain with manual ships, I think that is the future of our Indian seafarers who look at what they are about their future in seafaring. I'm also questioning whether we need 4-year courses at all. Are we wasting time? Even the Ivy Leagues across the US are looking at reducing their 4-year courses to maybe 2 years. Methanol has become the new subject for fuels, let's say. And how many of our students actually passing out of college understand methanol in a more nimble, agile, and flexible training program? These things could have been quickly ramped up and taught to the students passing out. What I'm talking about is that technology is affecting us in so many ways, and that there are so many changes bound to come about. If an institute sticks to a training program which is possibly 30 years old, how the hell are we ever going to get students who are ready for industry? My next question, or my next point that I'm going to place before this August gathering, is moving up the value chain. For a moment, let us imagine that we will have autonomous or semi-autonomous vessels in the next 10, 15 years. And I'm looking at a long-term planning that this nation needs to do to be ready for those times when we have autonomous or semi-autonomous vessels. The fact that autonomous or semi-autonomous vessels may come in means that the seafarer's importance is going to diminish progressively. I am saying that the mariner of the future may not be a seagoing mariner, he may be a land-based mariner. And if that happens, the value of low-cost labor from India, China, Philippines, and the Eastern European countries will diminish. The ship designer, who's normally or who's really a North European, will be then in charge of even running the vessel. And so I believe that unless we move up the value chain, unless we say that not only is our maritime education going to look at seafaring, but we are also going to look at ship designing, for instance, and that we are going to look at shipbuilding for the next 10 or 15 years, we are going to fall short at a time when people may not be required to go in the numbers that they are required to go on board ships. And at that point of time, will India lag behind in the maritime world? These are the 2 or 3 questions that I need to place before this gathering. Technology is always going to prevail. Our education system needs to be technology based. We need to look at the future from a technology perspective. We need to train our young students accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, these are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a very, very perceptive and no holds barred, thought-provoking overview. And I think you have broadly set the tone, because I think to call a spade is often not the easiest of things to do, and particularly when everybody wants to be very sugary, very syrupy. And I'm glad that you brought up some of these issues, and I couldn't but second what you mentioned about the scenario where you will have possibly the semi-autonomous, the next generation of vessels in about 10 to 15 years. And I'm also equally loath to predict a timeline for that, but I think very clearly that is the way it's looking going forward. And you hit the nail on the head when you said that there could potentially be a diminished role of seafarers in some senses. And to that extent, I completely endorse your view that are we even looking at that scenario? Because to me, it's critical that you do scenario building, for the future. This is something which we are often not taught as part of our run-of-the-mill syllabus in the curriculum. Do we foresee the future? Well, I'll come back to some of my thoughts later. And I think you have probably wound up well within your time. So thank you for that as well. Now, to fast forward, may I now invite Mr. Abdulgani Serang to give his own views on this issue. So the floor is yours, Mr. Serang. Please go for it.
Yes, thank you so much, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here. I thought the administration had spoken, the ship owners had spoken, and the association has spoken. So I thought, but we still have a trainer to speak, and I thought I will have the last word as a union. But nonetheless, it is a pleasure for me to share my thoughts. Like everybody is complimenting Shaukat Mukherjee, Captain Shaukat Mukherjee and his team, I would also like to do the same. But I also want to put some pressure on Captain Shaukat Mukherjee and his team that these sort of seminars which we are having, and these are very good ideas which are coming out. Definitely interactive session will be there, but we'll be failing in our efforts if these ideas are not collated, and at some point we should get some feedback of the bullet points of this whole seminar. Otherwise, it will just be a feel-good exercise. Today we'll speak, tomorrow, and then after that what? Then in another seminar we might be speaking the same thing. So I would advise the team who have organized the Future Skill Maritime to really come out with some bullet points, collated, and for the wider circulation. And just to Mr. Uday Purohit, he did mention that man did land on the moon, but I thought in some quarter it was fake news. Man really did not land on the moon. There is some fake news about it. It was done in the landing scene was done in a studio. That is what, there are some YouTube videos on that. So just to comment on that. Well, the COVID has stopped the lands and the skies, but only the seas are alive and active and continue to do so with the passion of our seafarers with the support of their family members. And since I represent the seafarers, and this is an opportune moment for me to touch on that particular aspect, that while seafarers have been declared essential workers or key workers, in some ways it is more of a cosmetic exercise when there are hindrances in crew change due to lack of political will. We salute the zeal of all the seafarers and the support which they have got from their family members in discharging their professional duties. And we continue as an industry, as a stakeholder, and with the support of the entire national and international shipping fraternity, we continue to ensure that the seafarers are not at the receiving end in this COVID situation. And we also wholeheartedly appreciate our maritime administration, the DG Shipping and our Ministry of Shipping, for coming out really good as far as the crew change is concerned. We have led the world in the crew change. Coming to our topic, India as a major maritime country and an important maritime labor supplier, and Indian seafarers are known for their competence, efficiency, and cost effectiveness. And of course, the Indian Marine Training and Education segment has been complemented for providing quality seafarers to global shipping. However, in this progressively competitive workforce supply scenario in global shipping, Excellence in maritime education and training is dynamic and it is a necessity. So my views will not necessarily be in the Indian context, but in general terms. And this is across the board, across the world, this scenario exists. Like any person coming into this vocation comes with the deep sense of dream and aspiration to make it good for themselves. And there is a passion involved. But at times, it is cut short when even after doing the required training, the training birds are not coming forward, they are not available. Means you do the best of the training. We are speaking about future skill training, and whatever best training you do, if there are no training birds or no gainful job opportunities, and particularly difficult for women seafarers, cadets and trainees and junior ranks, and there are many negative stories. So is this the lack of training imparted or fewer jobs? Jobs are plenty, but is competitive in this international arena. And the only thing which will stand apart for any nationality of seafarers, I repeat, the only thing which will stand apart for any nationality of seafarers is the skill sets, which is the direct result of training. The innovativeness has found its way into shipping with consistency. The skills required has evolved from purely physical to being increasingly intellectual, with artificial intelligence thrown not in bits and pieces, but at a very large extent. And newer technologies require knowledge about a wide range of subjects in order to become a good mariner. Increasing sophistication of vessels and associated equipment, as well as rising concerns about possible pollution that can be caused by ship's accident, has led to greater importance on a well-designed, structured education system. At the same time, let us not forget the human aspect. Karl Marx or any other economist, they still do say that labor is a commodity, but here we are dealing with human beings, so the well-being of seafarers is crucial for everything to fall in place. Shipping, we have to create that level of awareness. Many a time it happens that seafaring is not the first choice of many people. They try here and there, and if they're not successful, then what is left, what is doable? So that idea of we need to create more, and the efforts are on to create more awareness, but it has to reach into the interiors. We need to create more and more awareness about shipping to tap the right type of people with the right attitude and aptitude for seafaring. Specialized training facilities at most of the maritime institutes are not available because of financial constraints. The best of the trainings are futile if gainful employment is not there. I repeat, the best of the training are futile if gainful employment is not there, and non-availability of on-board training has become a big obstacle for students looking for a career at sea, and there are backlogs of those waiting to undergo the mandatory requirements, and training coming out of training institutes are joining the already big queue of already unemployed. There is a big queue, and trainees are just coming out and they are joining this big queue of unemployed. And many training institutes lacking quality of marine marine training that affect the country, the quality of the seafarers. Hence, the monitoring mechanism for the inspection of these institutes has to be more robust. It is the system is procedure already in place, but it needs to be more robust. The growing number of maritime institutes and the increase in the responsibility of the administration for the implementation of new international maritime conventions, aggravated by times a shortage of technical officers, has affected the efficacy of the inspections to ensure quality and uniformity required. Lack of insufficient English language skills among the seafarers is also one of the concerns. As the entire maritime training and education sector passes through a difficult phase and ups and downs of the recession in international shipping, it is important to ensure major regulatory reforms for maritime training and education sector is keeping pace with the competitive requirements of the global shipping. It was already touched by the earlier speakers that we need to be mindful, we need to be more aware of what we are teaching based on the international requirements and not what was the situation 2-3 decades back. An inspection process of the institute, because the quality, the training is imparted in institutes, the inspection procedures should be more robust. I repeat, it should be more mindful of the requirements of the present based on the stakeholders' inputs. Though there are good level of course interaction in the course materials, the outcome should not be an overzealous. Even there are many interaction, positive interaction taking place of what should be the training standard, how should we go. But at some time it is an overzealous in some quarters, so that should be avoided, and more emphasis should be paid on imparting technical knowledge, because technical knowledge is the key. We have situations, all things remaining equal, if there is a seafarer who is more technically sound, definitely that seafarer will be, has a better chance of getting gainful employment. And I would like to touch upon some issues about more opportunity for women seafarers and gender sensitization. Women seafarers have already shown their mettle. There should be more and more and fair opportunities for them on merchant ships and not necessarily on cruise ships, where they are already in good numbers. But public acknowledgement of companies who employ more women seafarers should be encouraged to create awareness. And gender sensitization should be part of the training curriculum. Digital censoring, the technology for monitoring ships' operation and performance have been steadily increasing in its sophistication. Ships of the future will have a complete network of sensors. We need to be aware, and we need to train our seafarers, the trainees who come in and about these. So they will be more in tune with the ground realities of what is in store for them when they join the ship. And of course, there will be bigger mega ships which are going to be already there and more yet to come, particularly on the container shipping. So we need to prepare our seafarers towards that. Greener shipping, it was already touched in some parts. The greener shipping, awareness about greener shipping and the way how to handle those type of ships should also be there. And one thing which we need, whether presently or in the future, the well-being and the mental health of the seafarers should be given more importance, because at the end of the day, it is the seafarers who are going to be affected, who are going to be utilizing the training and going to be working on board the ships. So the mental, and there has to be mandatory structures within the company procedures for well-being and mental health of the seafarer. Now, who could have predicted the COVID situation? We are in the midst of for the last 9 months we are here. But this COVID situation has also brought about new opportunities. While the seafarers, they are wanting to, they are doing online courses, which never, ever before we had that level of online courses. But these are new opportunities, so this also should be kept. I did mention of greener shipping, but the solar and the solar types of ships, which will be having, because in the 2 days back we had at the NSB some discussion at the National Shipping Board under the chair of Madam Malini Shankar about solar power for ships. So this is also which needs to be looked into. Lot has been mentioned about autonomous ship. Read my lips, read my face. I represent the seafarers. For I'm not that concerned, I'm not that obsessed or not that apprehensive over the autonomous ship will be coming and our seafarers will be losing jobs left, right, and so on. No, read my lips. It is not going to happen in that way as it has been projected, it has been predicted. It is going to happen, but not in the way that all the ships in the seafarers will run out of business. And because in the times of my great grandfather, there used to be 80 seafarers on board the ship. Time of my grandfather, there were 50. Time of my father, it was around 45. In my time, it is around 20. And average is 20. How low will you go? even if it will go low, the autonomous ship, as and when it comes, it will not come in that force as it has been predicted. And even whether the autonomous ships come does not mean to what level. One thing is sure that my union, mean the seafarers union, will never go out of business, because those the people who will be managing those ships from shore, on shore, we will make them our members. We'll fight for their rights.
My apologies, Mr. Gani. If you could don't mind up in about 2 minutes or so.
Okay, I thought I had. Fair enough, sir. I will just come up the last thing. I'll just winding up the attitude. Whether it is today or in the future, we need to spend more time on the attitude of the seafarers who are coming out as seafarers. So I would like to sum up this. I've just touched briefly because the time I had some more points, but then I would like to end up that the future is bright. It is only the opportunities which we need to tap up as far as the future skill situation is concerned about the maritime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gani. I think, as always, I think your inputs are extremely valuable. So I couldn't agree with you more that the paradigm which is going to emerge in the future is one where seafarers and clearly will not run out of business, but given the fact that we need to reorient ourselves, to reinvent ourselves, and ensure that we can confront and cope up with those scenarios as and when they unfold, that flexibility is what one looks at. And hopefully, in the process of transitioning to the new generations and the new way in which the business dynamics will evolve, hopefully the maritime institutions would be in a position to impart the appropriate skill sets. Now, may I invite um, Captain Prabhat Nigam as the final speaker of this panel to please take the floor and hold forth for the next 15 minutes. So it's all yours, Captain Nigam. Please go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Shetty. First of all, thanks to the Naval Connection led by Captain Shaukat Mukherjee, who has brought all of us together on this FSM platform. And Mr. Shetty, like always, listening to you is like poetry to ears when you shower with your beautiful vocabulary. It's a proud moment to be in this August gathering with Dr. Malini Shankar, Captain P.K. Chawla, Mr. Abdulgani, and my dear friend Uday Purohit ji. Namaste. Well, Dr. Malini Shankar has already touched upon STCW from a regulatory body point of view, followed by Captain P.K. Chawla, who touched the various aspects of maritime education and training, including the human element involved in it. My friend Uday Purohit brought up the topic of whether present training is contemporary or not. And finally, Mr. Abdulgani, he spoke the seafarers as well as a union's view. So, being the last speaker, I was wondering what is left for me to talk and what should I talk about. Knowing very well, fully aware that I will be the last speaker, and all the intellectuals before me would have already showered with the plethora of knowledge about maritime education and training and future of maritime education and training, I decided to make my presentation basic. Basic in the sense, first I started thinking like a student that what I require through maritime education and training, and then made the presentation from the point of view of a teacher. So given the time limit, I'll try to finish within my presentation within about 10 to 12 minutes, since I've already consumed 2 minutes. Let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Not as yet, Captain Prabhat Nigam.
It's visible? Sir, is my presentation visible?
Not so far.
Okay.
So may I urge that in the meanwhile you could carry on with the presentation while it is getting uploaded?
Okay. Just a moment. I just had a power outage, but the battery has taken over. Just bear with me for 2 minutes.
Mr. Deepak Shetty, sir, I will suggest we can continue with the discussion. In the meantime, Captain Nigam can get ready.
Yeah. So, Captain Nigam, as I said, if you could just make an oral presentation in the meanwhile.
Yes.
Would you want to carry the process forward in that manner?
Yeah, I will do that.
Please do so.
Since we have already, as I said, since we have already spoken about, now is it visible? It's coming now?
No, not really.
Okay. Let us.
No. I think we have probably lost him.
Yeah, I think so. That he's having a power outage, sir. So,
actually, he's back. Yeah. Yes, Captain Nigam, are you there? Hello.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. So please carry on because we are left with about 10 minutes max.
Okay. Taking back to the annals of history of education, if we see, okay, this glitch is there. No problem. Let the presentation be. We have seen a common thing when we see into the annals of history of education in the ancient stages where the universities like Nalanda, Takshila had excelled, and the present stage where universities like Cambridge, Harvard, Oxford, and in India like IITs, IIMs, there's one thing common which we see, or rather there are three things common which we see. First is the mentorship, that is Guru Shishya. Second is the learning ambience, and the third is the infrastructure. Well, today in the digital world, we have all the various ways of learning like CBT, e-learning, virtual classes, live video sessions on Zoom, etc. But are they effective? Are they meeting the purpose? I will later on, I will throw this open to the audience. In my opinion, they are just working as a support. They are only a support to the actual learning or training process. Do you? I hope you will agree to that. That today's digital learning cannot replace the training which is given physically. Had it been so, then we would say that knowledge is just content delivery. It is not content delivery. It is also hands-on training, skill sets development, which is required when there is a role model in front of you, or when it is taught in a scenario where practically it is being done. As Swami Vivekananda had rightly said, education is the manifestation of the quality already present in man. Well, education should always be for the wholesome development of a person and the living biosphere around him. It should be research-based development for maritime education and training. I am proud to say today that Chitkara University has designed a futuristic syllabus with a scope of continual improvement, which my friend Uday Purohit just mentioned, but is it contemporary or not? I wish I could show some of the slides, which is of national education policy, which is in relation to what I'm speaking, and what it tries to, what I'm trying to say is that even our national level committees have thought about it and made it. Oh, suddenly this has popped up again. I think my screen is visible now.
Yes, indeed, but you may probably have to fast track the presentation, Capt. Nigam.
Yes, I'm coming
roughly
straight
about
to
5 to 6 minutes maximum.
Yeah, I'm coming straight to this. Leaving from what I was saying, the dissemination of knowledge only is not content delivery. It is skill set and hands-on training also. And if we break this three Guru Shishya mentorship, learning ambience, and infrastructure, let us see what happens. It's a small snippet.
Hello, Mrs. Janaki here. I've started taking online classes for my children and I'm already fed up. Pasanga class attend பண்றாங்கன்னு இல்லையோ, all the parents come and sit in my class nicely. Especially the mothers. Correctly when I'm starting the class, only they will decide to feed their children. That is also fine. One mother was brushing the child's teeth during my class. Now homework காட்டுன்றா அவங்க அம்மா காட்டுன்றாங்க. Mothers are far better. Fathers irukangale. Yesterday during my class, one father was roaming around without a shirt, wearing one kutti shorts. Kinkini mangini is walking. At the path, all the children started laughing. Kekka bukken. 2 hours than the class. 1 hour went in kekka bukke, 1 hour went in attendance. Class over. Children notes எடுக்கறாங்களே உயிரை நல்லா எடுக்கறாங்க. ஒருத்த வீடியோ ஆனா ஆடியோ ஆஃப், ஒருத்த ஆடியோ ஆனா வீடியோ ஆஃப். இன்னொரு ஸ்பெஷல் விஐபி ரெண்டுமே ஆஃப். I am sure he's playing some PUBG game. பட் அவன் ஒன்னும் கேட்க முடியாது. ஏன் தெரியுமா? பிரின்சிபல் பத்மநாபனோட பையன். அவன் ஏதாவது கேட்டா போதும் பத்து வெல்கம். ஜானகி, he is just a child, Janaki. Let him be. But check his WhatsApp status. Say no to nepotism. Don't misuse power. நல்லா இருக்கு அந்த கூத்து. Hypocrites. மாதி hypocrites மா. நான் டீச்சரா நீ டீச்சராடி. வந்துட்டா எல்லா வீடியோலயும்.
With this video, what I was trying to say is when we do virtual classes or live video sessions through Zoom or other such facilities, we do not have control on the ambience which is there on the student side. Neither we have the control and the infrastructure which is on the student side. The teacher is there, but major elements is not there. So this is what was with this thing which a small snippet was trying to make point. Coming back to our National Education Policy 2020, professional development to support teacher is our greatest need. It's important to scaffold what is expected of teachers as much as it is of students. This is a very important thing that today when we talk about maritime education and training and development of training and futuristic training, are our teachers ready? Are they ready to disseminate knowledge for future? This is a big question which Uday also had asked. So we have to dwell on this. The key principles of national education policy, I'll quickly read it out. Respect for delivery, diversity and local context to be reflected in all curriculum and pedagogy and policy. Equity and inclusion to become the correctness of all educational decisions. Community participation, uplifting philanthropic private community participation. Use of technology in teaching and learning, removing language barriers. Emphasize conceptual understanding, learning for exams with no rote learning. Unique capabilities, recognizing, tapping them in each student. Critical thinking and creativity to boost logical decision making and innovation. And finally, continuous review. Build on sustained research and regular assessment by educational experts.
I'm afraid, Captain Nigam, you have no more than 2 minutes. My apologies for that.
Yeah, I'm just winding up. So our education policy, NEP 2020, is towards a more holistic and multidisciplinary education. As the 8 points which I have read, here is the details of it. So what should be the way in which education is disseminated in future? Well, in my opinion, it should be blended learning. And I hand over back to you, Mr. Shetty.
Thank you very much, Captain Nigam. I think for sharing your perspectives on some of the traditional modern facets of maritime education. So we are now at virtually the penultimate phase of this session 1. Before I throw the floor open for a Q&A round, and I'm sure I look forward to a very engaging and interactive module ahead. Very quickly, if I may just sort of share some of my own incremental thoughts. As I said at the outset, what I am sort of proposing here is an overlayer or a superimposition on the traditional, the very conventional mindsets. So let me just pick up a few strands and fast forward the whole thing. Essentially, the exponential growth of technology, and we're all familiar with all the buzzwords and the jargons such as IT, ITS, ICT, AI, machine learning, robotics, drone technologies. So long as we do not introduce our trainees and cadets to an understanding of what the technological revolution is in store, please be mindful of the fact that this is a real economy. It's a skill-based economy. You're only as good as the kind of skill sets that you bring to the table on a given day. So unless these budding seafarers are introduced to these topics and are given an overview, I'm afraid that we'll probably be left behind. Similarly, some of the other strands which I think, which to my mind, and I'm subject to correction, which are lacking, is the fact that, of course, there is a passing reference to some of the maritime security challenges such as piracy and armed robbery. But I think often we tend to sort of push that to the back burner and view that as not a very comfortable proposition or a paradigm to discuss. But I'm afraid the sooner we bring it up front and say that, look, there could be a potential worst case scenario where you may encounter some of these challenges, and how would you prepare yourself adequately is a thought I'll leave you with. Then the aspect of risk management holistically. Risk management, including containment, resilience, etc., is extremely critical. And that sort of extends to the proposition of crisis management as to how do you deal. And I think here, building multiple scenarios and saying that, look, this is how you need to visualize and think through and think necessarily out of the box. Then there is probably also an imperative need for blending the technology aspects with the commercial and the financial aspects of maritime business. So there has to be an introduction to, by way of a separate module. Hopefully, in some cases, it is available, but I think that's something we need to expand further going. The other thing that comes to my mind is for example, and this is, in my capacity as being on the global roster of experts in the United Nations, never ever have I seen any discussion on the scenario of the impact of the United Nations sanctions on the maritime sector. Often, this is a challenge which is left best for the mariners to fend for themselves, because people are not introduced to this paradigm that there is something, an animal called as a UN sanctions, and how will it play out, in terms of welfare, security, etc. So these are some of the aspects and nuances which we need to sort of look at and consider stitching it up into our syllabus. I think I'll pause here because we are now just barely left with about 10 minutes. In case Captain Shaukat Mukherjee is indulgent, if he could probably spill over for about 5 minutes beyond that. So I will sort of pause at this moment and throw the floor open to the audience. So, Captain Mukherjee, would you like to steer us through this Q&A? I believe on the chat box, you would probably have some questions popping up. And there could also be a show of hands as we go along. So if you could please read that aloud. And if there are identified panel speakers, so be it. Otherwise, we can have anyone take a shot at those questions. It's over to you, Captain.
Sir, thank you very much. And yes, as you rightly said, there's been some questions and I've been busy taking them down. And now I will put these questions back to you. And you can do the needful. You can answer them, or you can put it to the speakers. The first question which we had was somebody had written saying, sirs, as said by the previous speaker, attitude is one of the pillars of competency. Are we really in a position to say no entry to candidates who don't have the right attitude at the induction stage?
Dr. Malini Shankar, would you like to come in at this point?
Okay. Number one, how do you assess the attitude at the time of entry? So you have to start there. Do we introduce another test saying, to test their attitude? Are there tests available for attitude? We have the UPSC exams where they have something called a personality test. And even that does not always come out with the assessment of the attitudes. I think attitude is something that all of us, each of us, have to take responsibility for. Starting from the home to the school to the college and to the organizations that they work with. It seems to be, I think the faculty have to be more sensitive to mold the attitudes. There are some who are excellent at it, some who have to work hard at it. But ideally, yes, we would like to say no. But let me just flag one related issue, but unrelated. Some would think it unrelated. When a lady cadet joins this force and asks for admission or joins the merchant navy, she comes with a passion that is not exactly common among the males. From my limited experience, when the male joins, wants to become a seafarer, it's because an agent has told him, a neighbor has told him, somebody has told him that you can, once you finish this course, you can start with 2 lakh rupees a month salary. Whereas a lady comes with passion. So are we willing to take the lady in preference to the male? No, that's not the case. And I'm not here looking at gender equations, but I'm just saying attitude comes with certain individuals and we have to identify them and nurture them, and the others we have to build upon it. It's not unique to seafaring community. It's not unique to the maritime sector. It's a challenge that every single educational institution and organization is facing today, because our value systems have changed, and are we able to put the value systems back into place is the larger question.
So just to add to that perspective, I wonder whether we could have a closer look while we emphasize on the IQ component. Could we look at also sort of rebalancing it with an EQ quotient, the emotional quotient? Can we look at evaluating and say we address both of this competency? But I'll leave it as a thought. I guess that's for a discussion on another day. But EQ is a paradigm which increasingly a number of academic institutions look at. Well, for now, I think we leave it at that. Just before I part and hand it over to there's one paradigm of cybersecurity which is not often addressed in any of the curriculum. Cybersecurity is going to be a threat given the fact that you have increasing electronization and digitization of the systems on board vessels. I mean, please mark my words, you could have potential scenarios where vessels will be cyberjacked, will not be physically hijacked. Now, that's a scenario we need to look at very clearly. And correspondingly, just to park my thought, the need for cyber hygiene as to what are the do's and don'ts that the seafarers need to look at. Enough for now.
No, if I may just add a few words on that.
Please.
The issue of cybersecurity has been identified as a key issue by the National Shipping Board, and we had escalated it to the level of the ministry. The ministry has constituted a small group. We even had a presentation from a cybersecurity expert, because there have been, it will be, yeah, there will be cyberjacked, yes, but already there have been instances in the port, instances aboard, major companies have had this problem. So hopefully this group which has been constituted will be looking at it. In fact, the shipping board had suggested that cybersecurity issues should actually find place in the Shipping Act, Merchant Shipping Act itself. Enabling provisions, but then the Merchant Shipping Act a bill was in an advanced stage. So, and it was also the opinion of the cybersecurity expert that we need specific laws for specific sectors, like some of the European countries have done when it comes to cyber issues.
Yeah, thank you. As long as it is up front and center, I think that's fine. What we could also do is to leverage the provisions of the Information Technology Act 2000 at a very generic level, because it is fairly sector agnostic. But I think let's not, I don't want to elaborate the discussion further. So over to you, Dr. Captain Mukherjee.
Yes, sir. So the next question, 2 or 3 other questions are there. I think this is a very good question again. And there has been and it says there has been a lot of discussion on practical about improving human elements and over the decade, and lot has been already deliberated over human element. What are the practical strategies for improving the human element? That's the question.
Okay, Captain Chawla, would you want to respond to that?
Okay, yeah, can do. Practical strategies. I think the first thing that is required is to build up trust between the various stakeholders. So when it's on a ship, between the officers and crew and the master chief engineer team. When it comes to the interaction between the office, then it's more with the day-to-day people who are in touch, the vessel manager and the master chief engineer team. There unfortunately is still a bit of a them and us attitude in shipping. We tend to often talk about the ships as if that's a different planet for which we only criticize and not really look at it from the point of view that it's the responsibility of the company to train the individuals and to create ecosystems where they can succeed. Other strategies I would say is constant engagement with the teams. There is nothing as powerful as two people having a conversation. Anything and everything can be discussed if both parties remain open to listening to the other person. So in fact, as a company, we have a program called Speak Up on the ship, and we have an opposite side of the coin. We have a program called I Listen. So every vessel manager and auditor, when he goes on board, he's obliged to sit with the crew and listen to them. Just listen and accept that there are mistakes that we make in the office which affect the life of the seafarer. And equally, when we encourage them to speak up, it's all about whether any safety violations are happening on board, whether they are unhappy with anything, harassment, sexual harassment with the women cadets, that's very important. And we do have quite a few in our fleet, and we do encourage more to join. So I think we can give a long-winded conference on practical strategies only, but I would say let's remember 2 things: trust building and listening to each other in a calm, pleasant way and trying to find solutions together. The best solutions come from the people on the shop floor, which is that the seafarers give the best solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Captain Mukherjee, the next one, please.
Right, sir. I don't know whether this will be applicable for this session, but nevertheless, I will put it across to you, and that is, what is the governance and flag states doing for employing more people?
Okay. So, Dr. Shankar, would you want to comment on that?
Uh, I don't know whether I'm slightly out of touch with what the flag state is actually doing. But I think everything that the flag state, flag state does ultimately is intended to increase the presence of Indian seafarers in the world community. For example, the Ministry of Shipping, Port Shipping and Waterways, as it's now called, has drafted a document called Vision 2030. And I think it is a rare occasion when a vision document of a government actually has a whole chapter dedicated to enhancing maritime education and training. And within that enhancing maritime education and training, one of the targets is to increase the seafarers, presence of Indian seafarers in the global market. And all that goes into it is within that chapter of enhancing the standards for training. It has recommended that we have many of the speakers have spoken on that. Are we future ready? Are our students equipped to handle, practical issues on board? Do we have, for example, the ships are now less mechanical and more electronic oriented. So are the engineers actually given the inputs on less on mechanical and more on electronics and sensors? So can we have a dual degree on computers plus marine engineering? So there are several interventions which have been suggested there, increasing the knowledge clusters so that there is more active collaboration between educational institutions, active between the industry and the government. But as far as the Indian Maritime University is concerned, one thing that I'm very keen to do, and I have taken baby steps in this, is I don't think this specialized university and specialized sector can actually be a standalone and impart an education that leads to a degree and nothing more. So this is the active collaboration with the industry in terms of not only curriculum inputs, in terms of engagement to see whether the industry speakers can come and address the students, research projects, internship projects, which will all go into enhancing the skill level as well as I think the attitude level of the student. I think it was rightly pointed out by you, Mr. Shetty, that the student who comes out, the cadet, has to be aware of the ecosystem in which they are studying, ecosystem in which they will be working. They have to be aware of worldviews, not just cyber, but there are so many, the green shipping, the climate change. Basically, I will sum it up in just two phrases. One is critical thinking and analysis, as pointed out by Captain Pradeep Chawla, and an awareness of an ecosystem and leadership skills, as pointed out. These two are what will enhance the employability of the student. The employability is the question today, much more than unemployment.
So, if I may just add my two bit to that, I think the challenge for every maritime administration globally will be all the more so, such as seafaring supplying nations such as ours, would be not just in terms of looking at enhancing and augmenting the numbers. And clearly, I don't see why we should be so obsessed with that. While it's a goalpost that we need to, that's a normative thing which we need to look at. But I think even retaining our share against the challenges, and particularly in crises such as COVID, is something we need to address. And I think the bottom line here is that so long as we don't emphasize on upgrading the skills and giving the accent on excellence in education, maritime education, I think that's the key to it. Because automatically from that will flow an augmentation of the supply of seafarers who will be much sought after globally. Yeah. So, Captain Mukherjee, over to the next question, please. I think we need to fast forward. Sorry, you're not audible.
Yes, I am sorry. I was on mute. Yes, another very interesting question I thought can be asked in this forum, and it came from one of the students. He says, somebody said about English. So lack of English language skills. We all know English is very important. Why is it so necessary in the maritime that you cannot have somebody who cannot speak English? Because most of the other countries do so, and not speak English, that is.
So, Mr. Serang, I recall that you had touched upon this. So, would you like to take the question?
Yes, definitely. See, we are in an international field. We have training institutes, and all our training books are in English. We tell our seafarer at least spoken English. You have to have that level of spoken English. We cannot have training institutes books in local languages because we have it in English. So at least that level of English is important. At times we tell our seafarers, majority of our seafarers work on foreign flagships, and a percentage also work on the Indian flagship. So as in a lighter wind, we tell them, you want to earn dollars, learn English. Okay, otherwise you are in Indian context. But you have to have the level of English, because we have had cases in the pandemic times. 3 or 4 seafarers of our seafarers, they were employed on ships which had foreign nationals as officers. They had to come back because of the lack of English. They couldn't understand the conversation on board, and particularly when the pilot was on board. So you need to have at least spoken English. And while I have the flow, I just want to touch that companies should have their own procedures and spend money. They should spend money on training, because many of the companies, they just are interested in what is that finished product. They have their ships worth millions of dollars at the stake, and they keep it at the stake of the few seafarers. They don't want to shell out much money as required. They want finished product, or they are interested in coaching. Many companies do have training standards, their own training, but majority of the companies, they don't have training classes that they should spend money. So they should allocate proper budget. It's no point just talking big in forum, but they should really allocate budgets for training purpose for all ranks of seafarers, not just the officers, because usually it is only for the officers. We have issues with that, but for all ranks of seafarers. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, Captain Mukherjee.
Yes, sir. Questions are flowing in. So what I will again suggest is, sir, I'm giving you this last question. It's and then we can have these questions and put it on again to the panelists on the email, and then I can get back to the others with your answers.
Sure thing. Yeah.
But this question I thought again was quite interesting, and it says, I think Captain Chawla had mentioned, because I remember hearing him speak about finding the essence of training and the application of its knowledge in the market. So somebody said, why can't it be reverse? Finding out the application of something or finding out the needs of something, and then training the people who will be able to deliver on those needs. Why can't we go reverse, and then the effectiveness of training would be the best in those cases.
Okay. So may I urge Captain Nigam to come forward, and would you like to answer that question?
Yes, sir. Well, when I was mentioning about how the student think, this is what I meant. And unfortunately, I could not open that slide where I had to show this. Basically, we have to first see the product, what is required, what is the demand, and then make that, like we do in the industry. Suppose we need a product for some particular machine, we manufacture that product. We do not keep on giving, okay, use karo, isi ko use karo, isi ko use karo. So this is what I was meaning, when you have to see from the student's perspective and the industry requirement, then this is what we should head in for. That if today autonomous ship is the requirement, are we having a curriculum for autonomous shipping and preparing operators of autonomous shipping, or are we still focusing on training them on use of sextant or steam turbines and other things? So we have to think in this way, in a proactive way, futuristic, 15, 20 years from now, what is the requirement? Because today, if I take admission of a student in say BSc or BTech, he will pass out after 4 years or 3 years. Is his training relevant after 3 or 4 years? What am I training him for? So this is very important, that the managers or the regulators and people who are making policies for education should think futuristic. They should not think in the sense what they were trained for and उसी चीज को पढ़ा दो आगे. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So, Captain Mukherjee, if I read you right,
you had. Sorry, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Sorry.
No. So I believe it is now 5 minutes past 1. So you have another session to follow. So being mindful of that.
I can, sir. I can give you 2-3 minutes more because you requested for 5 minutes more. Still have 3 minutes more for 5 minutes 13. 5 to 13, and there's one question I want to put to you. You can decide whether you can go ahead with that or.
Yeah, please feel free.
I found it a very good question. One youngster has written, and he says, "What steps would you suggest to keep the trainers relevant to the latest development in the maritime industry and competent to deliver relevant content, learn latest skill sets and competencies? Faculty development programs for maritime trainers essential."
That's very important.
So my response would be a reiteration of all that I said, because we need to go beyond and the status quo. We've all been sort of very, very religiously scrupulous followers of the STCW convention. It's time that we looked at STCW plus or even beyond that. Sorry, I see Dr. Shankar raising a.
Yeah, I just thought I can have, if you will permit.
Sure. Please feel free.
We are looking at faculty development programs, but the traditional faculty development programs that are normal for a central or state university are not really applicable here. It has to be mutatis mutandis.
Oh, Deepak,
so since the industry people are here, I was going to say that one of the options, a practical suggestion would be, can the faculty actually have a kind of, I wouldn't call it an internship, but a session with the industry, a week with the industry, 3 days with the industry to understand the latest developments, to live in that environment for a couple of days so that they will be seized of what are the problems and what are the expectations of the industry. Because just going to a faculty upgradation program is only the teaching methodologies and the learning methodologies, but how do they interact and engage with the industry itself? So can we work out something? And this is where, Captain Chawla and people of his ilk would be helpful in trying to advise us in the future on how we can do this engagement so that they come back with some, because the university system unfortunately says you have to have a PhD to teach, and the PhD person does not necessarily have practical experience. So we are trying to get past tear into that, but in the meanwhile, a certain amount of exposure to the industry or to other organizations, even unions, etc. This is what, all of us have, Mr. Shetty, when we get into service, we have what is called an attachment to different offices, which gives you an insight into each of those organizations. So an attachment of that kind, 2 days in each office, would be very, very, very helpful for the faculty to come back and, within a week, they will be aware of what is the ecosystem in which the students are expected to function once they graduate.
Yeah, so the point is extremely well taken. So this brings me, to the other nuance where there has to be increasing synergy and interface between the academia and the industry. We have been talking of this for ages, but a time has come where we need to have robust mechanisms. One such could be the proposition which you have now just advanced of having a secondment for whatever time that is consensualized, where the faculty goes and spends some time with their boots on the ground, understands the reality, comes back, and there could be a corresponding reverse exchange as well, where there could be somebody from the industry coming in, spending some time. So this, reverse engineering and this cross fertilization of views needs to be very, very much in the upfront. But I think at the end of the day, just to sort of give my sort of incremental views on this, Captain Mukherjee, when I say that when the faculty has to understand, all that I touched upon, that's my humble submission, that they need to be oriented towards understanding a 360 degrees worldview. It's not enough just to have that ostrich-like attitude that I am just buried my heads in the sands of the books. That's all. That's not good enough. You need to understand what are the trends, the typologies that are coming up. What are the new modus operandi? All that is happening, and that is to be fairly projecting for the future. And this is where I think we are also lacking a robust think tank in our industry. And this is something which we have gone on speaking times out of number and times immemorial. We don't have a robust think tank for the maritime industry, which feeds into these intellectual discourses and tries to contribute in terms of the way progressive thinking should be advanced. So that's another critical missing piece where there has to be this triangulation or a quadrangulation or whatever you say between the maritime administration, industry, academia, and understanding as to what are the emerging trends, and then how do you interlink and interface all of this with all that's happening. So do we then have any further questions?
Thank you very much. I don't think, sir, there is any more time, because like you rightly said, we've been lining up ourselves for the next session.
Sure.
Next session.
And more than that, I think I'm mindful of the fact that people are going to be yearning for their lunch. So if I can just sum up and say just a couple of
is our session followed by lunch, or our session is followed by lunch?
Virtual lunch.
You can have virtual lunch. You can raise a virtual toast. You can go for it. Okay. So just to say that you can never over or under emphasize the need for excellence and professionalism. I think any career, any industry is only worth its salt so long as it does not subscribe and live by the credo that you need to excel, you need to be a true professional. And that, if I may just put, jugaad is not good enough, chalta hai attitude is not good enough. You need to be world beaters, then you need to excel. And excellence comes in your understanding, not just pragmatically, but also in your intellectual thought level. The other point, just to take forward what Mr. Abdulgani had mentioned, and I completely second that, is that this is to Captain Mukherjee, that please do derivative deep dive into what we have discussed over the last 2 odd hours, and then try and piece them together into a structured, formal document with concrete suggestions, and then take it forward so that there is enough follow-up and that it doesn't remain just a platform for platitudes, which we have n number of them where we keep just spouting our own 2 bit of gyan. I think you need to go beyond that. So that's for you. And finally, just to wrap up, this is on my behalf as the moderator and on behalf of Naval Connection and Captain Mukherjee, to express my sincere gratitude to all the panel speakers for their excellent insights, to Dr. Malini Shankar for her exceptional keynote address, and also for very graciously staying back and being associated with the Q&A session. And penultimately to you, Captain Mukherjee, the organizers, for the phenomenal job that you've done. And finally, to all the attendees and the audience for their extremely patient hearing, and also for some of the very thought-provoking questions which have come up. And I think that's the nuance we look forward to in platform this, where it is very engaging and interactive, where it becomes bilateral and plurilateral in senses more than one. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Sir, thank you very much. I cannot end this session without my personal thank you to you, Dr. Malini Shankar, Mr. Abdulgani Serang, Mr. Uday Purohit, Captain Pradeep Chawla, and Captain Prabhat Nigam. Thank you for your engagement and your especially time. All of you at your levels are extremely busy. I understand that. You've taken time to come for the dry runs, and we didn't want any technical issue on that very day. So we had these dry runs, and we had this this session of 2 hours. And sir, I will definitely form a structure, and I will send it to all the I had deliberated while announcing the FSM 2020 that we will study the recordings, we will take advice from you, we will form a structure, and we will give it to the Ministry of Shipping as well as the IMO. So that is absolutely on the cards. Thank you for advising us on that. So without any further delay, I would like to end this session with, again, a thank you. I am as good as my team, sir. And the team has really worked out on the platform and all these sessions last few months. And we could not have done even 1 inch of what we are doing without the support of you and all the people who are there, and all the associations who are there who've supported us behind this endeavor. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone. Have a good day.
I would I would like to whoever is hearing us right now, and the global audience who are looking at us and watching us on live on Facebook and YouTube, please do visit our lounges and network. You can see old friends, seafarers, old colleagues, former colleagues. There are about many tables, and you can go and leave any table, join any table, and find out who's sitting there, and you can go into a one-on-one discussion with them. Please do visit our arena. Please go into the 3 arenas that booths we have: HSBC booth, the ARI booth, and the booths of the Ocean Technologies. And they have power-packed presentations, and you will be able to know what new technologies are there in future for the use in the maritime industry. So thank you very much. It's from the Naval Connection, from the Future Skills Maritime, Session 1, Rethinking Maritime Education. It is over and out, but we will stay with you on Facebook and on YouTube all the while for 27th and 28th till we meet again, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very
Namaskar.
much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.